So I am really delighted today to have one of my absolute favourites, Danielle Matthews, back on the show again. And for the first time, someone I'm really, really excited about. Not that I'm not excited about you, Danielle, but we've spoken a lot before. Dr. Carolyn Hoffman, who is an amazing naturopath. So for the view of the listeners, we're going to be talking you through some really, really great health solutions today. But for the benefit of the listeners that don't know you both, can I ask you both, starting with you, Dr. Carolyn, to introduce yourself and tell us a bit about your experience?
Most welcome. It's exciting to be here with you. So my background is as a traditional naturopath. I'm board certified in that field. I think of myself as a wanderer in health, kind of collecting modalities and just methods, because I view myself, and certainly because I don't deal in drugs, and my goal is, always about lifestyle and owning our health. I'm always looking at what are the tools in my toolbox that can help someone get down to the challenge of, what is the root problem that we have that's causing this dysfunction, whatever that is, and whatever name it might have. And so I've kind of gravitated to things that have made a huge impact in my life and my family's life. And then naturally, from my background originally was as a teacher of ballet originally, I love to disseminate information. So that's been a natural kind of process. But I do have a real interest in gut health. So I am a digestive health specialist and enzyme therapy. I've done a lot of neural integration, doing QEEG, neural integration for brain, and kind of pulling that together. I think at a point where people weren't really even thinking about the gut-brain connection, it wasn't so much a thing then, but most definitely is. And so I just love to help people explore, how do you help people become an owner in their own health, and and stay out of the doctor's offices, which aren't always offering really healthy solutions at all. So that's kind of my journey into what we're doing today. Took place about 5 years ago, and has been kind of an interesting evolution in switching around how I think about what we do. And I'm now really excited because I have just this one approach that really helps me focus on literally everything every single cell does. So that's really profound.
It's so profound, isn't it? It's I'll come on to sort of how that works, about how I do it in a minute. But before we do that, Danielle, do you want to just introduce yourself for anyone that hasn't seen you, and also the work that you do, so much amazing work in helping people restore their health?
Absolutely. Yeah. Well, I'm glad to be back. And for those I haven't had the pleasure of speaking with before or connecting with, I kind of went on this health journey 10 years ago. I lost my health due to a car accident, and it put me on a very different track. I've always been interested in the body. I, like you, Catherine, my degree's in biology. I've always loved how the human body works. But when I lost my health, it started opening up new doors for me, because the Western world didn't have the answers. And so I had to start looking at, these quote unquote alternatives for what could help support my brain. And ultimately, I landed on the redox signaling. It was the Asea that allowed my world to actually start shifting for the positive again. And I could actually start, functioning. My body started to repair. And when I got my health back, I just thought, this whole thing I went through was for a reason. And I've been put in a position to help a lot of people. And whether it's through, honestly, Catherine, I share a lot of just inspirational things because of what I learned just with my own mind going through a trauma like that, and what's real in life and what isn't, what the important things are. So I share thoughts like that online every single day. I also teach meditation. It's something that helped me a lot in my journey as I was going through that injury. And I think just brings us back to the quiet space within, which we all should access into. But the biggest thing I do is educate about the redox signaling technology. I just was blown away by what it did in my own health. And then when I dove into the science, it was like light bulbs going off everywhere. Like, holy cow, what do we have our hands on? So that's where I spend most of my time and energy. And I've gotten to meet most amazing people, including, Carolyn, Dr. Hoffman. She and I crossed paths because of this. And that's what I love about Asea. It pulls in some amazing people from around the world, because it's a global company. And so it's so fun to learn. And, you know, she's taught me so much about different areas of health, and then how the Redox links into it all. It's just, I'm so excited for today's conversation because she's brilliant. I kind of want to sit back and listen. I always learn something.
I know, me too. And I'm just, because often I don't explain to my listeners sort of why I'm so passionate about this, because my day job, so to speak, and has been for the last 20 years, as a holistic health practitioner. It's a bit of a general term, I'll explain it, but mainly for animals. You can see two of my dogs relaxing in the background there. And I say for animals and their humans, because there's always so much overlap in terms of what's happening with our animal health and what's happening with our human health. And like you, Carolyn, I use such a wide range of modalities that I've built up, you know, through experience over the last 20-25 years. And everything I use is sort of the natural approach, and also teaching people a lot about how to make healthy lifestyle choices for their animals and themselves, which is crucial. And we're going to be covering that today. But when I first got introduced to Asea and redox molecules, obviously as a biologist, I'd learned all about redox molecules. But I a bit poo-pooed it and sort of like, oh, you know, yes, another miracle cure. You know, I've been working with a lot of natural substances in all sorts of ways for years, seen there, done that. And then when I eventually tried it, actually more with a couple of my relatives who are really, really unwell, and then with my very healthy, very fit 20-year-old daughter, who said, Mum, my recovery and my ability to train longer, harder, recover better, I was like, oh my goodness, okay, I really need to look into this. And therefore, you know, only about 6-7 months ago, sort of my journey started. So I think all three of us were very much looking at things truly holistically. And we're really, really passionate about sharing it, because like you touched on, Carolyn, it's all about, you know, sharing this knowledge and passing it forward so people can make choices about their life and their health and wellness and abundance in all areas of their life, rather than reacting to what's thrown at them, which is obviously always putting you on the back foot. Now, one of the things I heard you, if you don't mind just starting this, I heard you talking in one of your other brilliant interviews, and all the links to contact with these wonderful ladies will below the video as always, about a double-blind placebo study on 35-year-olds that had been done with the redox molecules. Would you be able to talk us through this? Because this is brilliant.
Yeah, that was interesting. I mean, that came out probably about 3 months after I'd really started to work with the technology. And I kind of laugh to just digress a little bit, because I turned down that information in 2011 for the same reasons, like, yeah, you know, that doesn't seem that significant to me. And I really missed the boat. I mean, I kind of realized now between 2011 and 17, when I finally turned around and I nearly missed it again, ironically. You know, that there were obviously so many people that I could have helped very differently with this, but the significance of that study I find fascinating from many different levels. So first off, they started with 35-year-olds. And there's actually an important piece about that, because I've been reading it actually only in the last couple of months, that scientifically they've analyzed that the metabolism, I think often people think about metabolism as just to do with weight loss, you know, either you're thin or you're fat or whatever, and it's the metabolism is all about diet, but it isn't. Metabolism actually represents literally the function of every cell, the energetic production for anything to take place. And it's interesting that I was reading that our metabolism is energetic and kind of hits this tipping point at 35, and then we go downhill. And I was reading some things that were saying that we're actually going to spend from 35 to the end of our life struggling and never ever going to be able to achieve and maintain or restore the level of metabolism that we have cellularly up until that point. And that kind of overlays for me this piece about the double-blind study on the Asea. Here they were, 35-year-olds. So they analyzed their genetic expression, the signaling level, the efficiency with blood work. It went through this fancy multi-million-dollar machine, an Affymetrix array, for whatever we want to know about that. But so they tested it. Now, I think one thing to kind of, you know, emphasize about this is that at 35, their gene signaling had already turned off. It was already diminishing. Now, I've read studies that show that pesticides affect our redox signaling. So we know that there's a huge deluge that we're all suffering from in this particular lifespan where we're at, that we're all being hit by not simply stress, but, the pesticides, the chemicals, the environmental toxins. It's coming at us left, right, and center. So they have these 35-year-olds, they do the blood work on them, and they see that their genes have already started to turn off. They put them on the Asea, 8 ounces a day for 8 weeks, and then they retest their gene signaling efficiency. Now, here's really what I think was particularly stunning. 100% of the people taking the Redox uniformly experienced a 20 to 31% improvement in gene signaling efficiency in 5 major areas. Well, I actually do a caveat here because I sat with one of the lead PhD guys when this got released. We happened to be at a dinner and I talked to him at great length. And he said that, in fact, all the genes had uniformly experienced this improvement. But genetically, I don't think we're advanced enough, and they haven't mapped every single gene that exists. So in the report, they chose to simply talk about the 5 that are fully mapped and understood at this point. And so that was the innate immune signaling system. Hello, that's our initial defense line against everything, right? In inflammatory signaling. Cardiovascular health with vein elasticity, that's a pretty significant aspect to it. Digestive enzyme production, which, being a digestive health specialist, kind of caught my attention straight away because that's all I do is enzyme stuff. And then the other side of the coin, that if we are unable to absorb and we have an inhibition in how we absorb, it actually changed that factor too. And then the 5th one was hormone signaling and vitality and kind of wellness. So 100% of people had these uniform shifts. Now, we always talk about the fact that this is made from what's in our cells, the same thing our body uses, which is the saline in our cells, sodium chloride and water. So, of course, there's a lot of misinformation because people put a lot of junk out there on the web, right? Oh, this is just salt water. Well, you go make salt water in your kitchen. You're not going to get the same outcome from this at all. It is not. And if it was that simple, why would we have a company that's been manufacturing this for 12 years with multi-million dollars of investment and patents and proprietary process to come up with something that's entirely different than just go to your kitchen and pour some water and stick some salt in it, right? But they gave them saline on the placebo group. Now, 2 pieces. 100% of people taking the Redox had this improved benefit. On the placebo, it was a 0% change. Oh. That struck me in and of itself. Forget Asea, that in itself is really remarkable because in double-blind studies, placebo will influence anything, right? If we believe there's a certain shift, that's why they have placebo. So when that study came out, I actually went back to a number of research scientists and I said, okay, tell me, how often, if you're doing research on drugs or whatever you're studying, do you ever see 100% response to whatever you're testing and a 0 on the placebo? And they all said to me, never. Don't see that. So what does that mean? A couple of things, right? At 35, you don't feel your genes are already turning off. You only know that by looking at blood work. We don't notice that, but I think we do begin. That correlates with why this tipping point is coming at 35, because we're now on the slide. We've already started a slide. We start that around 15. In terms of production of these molecules drop. But I think cumulatively, we don't necessarily become particularly aware of the fact that we are aging, but how many people by the time they get to 40 start to notice what has already been building in the previous 20 years. And so there's those layers that will tie into this. But, I looked at that and I said, wow, as a practitioner, everything lies in the first 2. Immune response and inflammation. We know that disease creates inflammation, inflammation creates disease. So there you go around. That affects everything that anyone's coming to the table with. And then you have these 3 other major things. But here's what's interesting. We have 5 names there for single gene names, but they're like a domino effect. You open a door and then they move on, right? So this is not a one and done thing. I mean, this is, you know, those wonderful domino games that people do when they roll on and roll on and roll on. That's my picture in my mind. But here, the inflammatory signaling marker, for example, there's 15 other markers. Things that those influence are things like serotonin. That keeps us feeling happy, right? Who do we know that feels stressed and anxious about what we've gone through in the last 2 years? How many teenagers are really struggling with feeling, you know, at ease with themselves? And that's enormously important. And if you have gut dysfunction, you're going to have that serotonin dysfunction. I mean, they go together. Things like circadian rhythm and sleep, that affects every single one of us. You know, things to do with insulin signaling, thyroid, how we build brains with BDNF, this fancy thing called BDNF, which is building brain signals. Hello, we all need to keep those in good check. And interestingly, the BDNF piece also links back again to insulin signaling and metabolism. So, you know, there's all sorts of things that go on in this. So when we say we're improving our inflammatory signaling markers, we're also improving multiple things behind it. There was another study, they looked at it, you know, another 8 weeks after people had stopped taking it. And what was really interesting was that the original marker levels that people had, whatever was their kind of backstop point where they were operating, that was kind of where they had reset themselves to back to this level of less function than they had with the Asea. So I think a really significant thing that shows us, you know, this affects everybody, is there for everyone.
Yeah, and I'll just add too, like that study when it came out, you know, that was in, I think it was 2017, right, Carolyn?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
I had been using Asea myself for a couple of years, and I had seen so many different things. Like I had watched people tell me they're sleeping deeper. I had watched people tell me they have this like feeling of well-being, like this shift in you know, their emotional state. I'd watched people with, you know, blood sugar issues resolving. I'd seen so much. And when that study came out, the gene that excited me was like the EGR1, because again, it's pathway signaling, right? It's that domino. It impacts circadian rhythm. And I went, oh, there we go. Now the science is catching up to what I've been seeing for years, to, you know, to show this and the serotonin levels and all those things. But what I loved, I mean, I'm 33 now. And what I enjoyed about that study was the last piece you just shared, which was that they took them off the Asea for 8 weeks and then retested, and they were back at their levels where they had been. So what that showed me was, okay, I don't feel Asea working on a day-to-day basis all the time, right? And I have people tell me, why, Danielle, as a healthy young person, are you drinking this stuff? And I'm like, you don't understand what I know. Like, because I know that my body is inundated with things all the day, causing stress and switching things off that I don't necessarily feel. And so it was like brilliant of them to do this on young people, because they don't know that their genes have been turned off. And then the long-term ramifications of that might hit us in a decade. Okay. And I never want to lose my health again. Right. So I look at that and I say, okay, so how can I proactively kind of put things into my system that are going to help my system stay alert, stay turned on, even though I'm not feeling it. And that to me is key. It's like that study was just like, yep, there you go. This is why I continue to take it. Even if on that day-to-day basis, I don't notice the shifts, I know that that's happening. It's just like when I take vitamin D, I don't feel the levels in my blood change, right? But if I were to do blood work, you can see it. So, you know, that's how I look at it now. And I do think it's important too, though, to track things. And it's interesting. Some people are able to track blood work, right? Because they happen to have gone to the doctor, but most of us, right, we're not doing that. But there is a health tracker. And Carolyn, I think this is something that you do as well. It's like having people just baseline where they're at, because with something like this, we don't know where it's going to work first. And we don't know what's going to trickle up that they notice on the system level. Right? We know it's working, especially with that study. It's like, well, it's definitely doing something on the cellular level, but what's the system going to feel like? And when people track stuff, do you find this too, Carolyn? It's like, all of a sudden they go back and they go, oh yeah, I forgot that I used to wake up twice a night to go to the bathroom. That's not happening anymore. And so having people baseline, it's so key.
Yeah, and that's the challenge is, you know, when we have something that's constantly part of our life that we're struggling with, and maybe medications aren't solving the problem, we just find some way to adapt or handle it, you know, it vanishes, and we're not aware of that until there's an aha. It's like, oh yeah, where did that go to? Yeah, I mean, and I had, you know, that was one of the first things I found when I moved into teaching and working in natural health. I mean, I had a client who we benchmarked, and this was 20 years ago, we benchmarked health. And one of her challenges was that she was always extremely achy and stiff when she got out of bed in the morning. And, you know, we came to our first kind of follow through on things, and I was going through and I'd asked her the question about that. And she goes, oh, no, I'm fine. I don't have any problem. And I said, oh, that's really kind of interesting, because you said when we last talked, you know, that you were very achy and sore every time. And she went, oh, yeah, so that's that whole thing, is that, you know, unless we track and we're very mindful and focused, and it's not about being, casual. I think it's just that we're overloaded with life, and we don't always notice things that disappear. But yeah, I would agree with you entirely.
It happened to me. Like, I don't think Catherine even told you about this. Like, I have a curve in my spine. So my whole life, like, they wanted to do surgery when I was young and put a rod in my back. But my mom, like, she was adamant that not happen. And we did a lot of like manual work and swimming and stuff to get my muscles there. But I always had discomfort in my back. Like, always. It was just there because my muscles were, you know, one side was more spasm than the other, pulling my spine. I have no idea when it happened, and I didn't even notice it happened. But somebody was at an event sharing that they had started Redox, that they had a curve in their spine, and that the discomfort was gone. And I went, holy cow. Like, we're talking like 20 years of my life. I had discomfort, and I didn't notice that it went away. And I went, well, I wonder when that happened.
It's brilliant. It's so brilliant. And it's such an important point, because one of the things I do is I'm an animal iridologist. And the beauty about what we all do is that we know that the problems are building up long before the physical symptoms manifest or display themselves, whether you're a dog, whether you're a human. By the time you've got the physical symptoms, the problem's been building up for a long while, hasn't it? And we've got into this belief system, a lot of people who've been using traditional Western medicine, that, you know, you have a problem, you go to the doctor, you have a symptom, you get some medication and the pain goes away. And I always explain, well, that's just like taking the red warning bulb out of your car dashboard. You know, the problem's still there, it's masking for a while. Now, Caroline, can you talk us through about, you know, we say with the Asea or Redox, and by the way, guys, this talk is not just all about that. It's just something we've just found so passionate that's helping so many of our family and clients as the foundation. But why we say give your body 3 months, regardless of what it is, because these problems take you a long while to build up, and we've got to allow the regeneration time.
Yeah, you know, I mean, there's a couple of things that go on there. I mean, as a base level, it takes us 4 months to change the blood work once. So, you know, and it is this kind of magic bullet mindset that we struggle with, right? And you use a different analogy. I will often ask my clients, you know, do you have a smoke alarm in your house? And they say yes. And so I say, well, if it goes off in the middle of the night, what will you do? And they said, well, I'll get up and look for where the fire is. I said, would you ever consider turning off the noise and going back to sleep? You know, they look at you like, well, that's a totally crazy, ridiculous thing to do, because obviously there's a problem. And I said, well, that's what a drug does. It switches off the alarm bell. But the problem, as you said, is way deeper. It's underneath the surface, and the smoke has been coming for quite some time before it triggered the alarm. In fact, scientifically, 8 years, cells shift 8 years before they become a disease that we actually get a name for. So that's why, Danielle, to your point about, you know, when people say, well, why would you do this? Prevention, may you never, ever know what you're preventing. That is worth everything, because it's so much more expensive to try to solve damage, which often we can't because it may have gone too far, all right? And that it costs a lot of money to solve a problem when it's become a big problem. It's much cheaper to maintain our health, to maintain our houses, to maintain our cars, than it is to wait until something's fallen off or is broken. So, you know, within the human body, the kind of tricky piece about Redox is the body's very, very smart, and it knows what our personal priorities are. So, and that's why Danielle says, you know, benchmark, because if you've got bad knees and you can't climb the stairs, or you can't get in and out of your seat very easily, that's your major thing. But it may be, as we say, that the body gets in there and it's like this renovation crew. It has the common sense to look around and say, what's the number one priority? Now, God forbid that underneath the surface, we have a tumor growing that we don't know anything about, because often the body's going to go work on something that we may have no clue is even coming up, you know, along the track. So we always say, start by benchmarking everything, the big things, the insignificant, the subtle, take the photos. We have these amazing photos of cellular change from the outside, and just remember the wrinkles on the outside reflect the wrinkles on the inside, so the damage. We'll often say to start with a baseline amount for that first week, for kind of typically 4 ounces, and just recheck everything and see if we've noticed, right? Because we might not have noticed, but have we got an aha moment for something? Now, it could be that the knees are the problem, but we sleep better suddenly, or we don't come home in the afternoon and sit on the sofa and fall asleep like we might normally do. Those are indicators that stuff is changing. Now, if you're impatient and you want to see that bigger change because it's a bigger renovation that your body has to achieve, you might want to drink more. And very often we'll do what we do in clinical study, which is 8 ounces a day for maybe a month, maybe 2, who knows, you know, what it is that we have to work on, allow the body to work on. But we know that in another double-blind study, 100% of us are having these blood serum marker changes the moment we start drinking it. So the moment we're drinking it, it's working. Again, we don't feel blood serum markers change. We just don't. In the same way, we don't feel cholesterol changing, right? But then suddenly you get a blood test and they say, oh, it's out of whack, right? Did you feel that? No, not really. And just give your body time. We know at 1 month in, probably 50% of people are seeing the kinds of things that they're looking for. But the 3-month point where we get to this 90% benefit seems to me to tie more in line with just the biology of changing over cells, you know, and then having a bigger quantity of healthier cells with much more resonant frequency, much better conversations, and being able to hear where the challenges are, and resources, because we're supplying our body with resources to go back and pick up on stuff that it hasn't done. It didn't manage to complete the job.
That's so brilliant. And you know, the connection point is so important. I mean, luckily, anyone who watches my channel, they're pretty well informed people, and they understand the concept that we are just all energy, and that energy can't be created or destroyed. It will transform. But also they understand the analogy of the tuning fork. So we talk a lot about lifting our vibration and staying in a high vibrational state, and how that lifts others up around you. But exactly the same is happening in a microcosm level in our bodies, because when you keep going with this, the effects are so cumulative, because what you're doing is you're restoring the balance and communication between all the different cells in your body. And then you get to a critical mass where you've got more healthy cells in your body, and then you'll see even quicker changes. So it's so beautiful to see this. I work with animals self-medicating, Carolyn, and it's fascinating to see. It's exactly what you and Danielle were just describing. So you might say, I'm taking it because my knees are bad. But when an animal is self-medicating, which all animals do in the wild, they've got an innate ability to know what order their body needs to heal in. And that brings me on nicely to the gut and the importance of the gut, which is something we're all really, really passionate about. Should we have a little chat about that and how crucial that is?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I know that, you know, as this gut brain thing has become more popular over the last decade or so, everybody loves to talk about the gut as the second brain. I think it's the other way around. I actually think that the gut is really the first brain, because we have 80% of our serotonin is made in the gut. So how can you have a happy, healthy brain if your gut is out of balance? You know, it's automatically, we will talk about leaky gut, leaky brain. They go hand in hand. I have the visuals in my mind for the brain as being command central in Star Wars, Star Trek, you know, the kind of command center, you know, because it's receiving information all the time, and then it's giving out instructions, you know, go faster, go slower. I mean, that's essentially all that cells are doing, is either speeding up or slowing down metabolism, the energy within the cell. So gut is just, you know, it's your first line of defense. I always say, think about ourselves as a donut. Because when we put food in, it's actually not in the body. until it gets absorbed through the gut wall. So we are a whole from top to bottom, and if it passes through, it's not technically within the body, it's only in when it actually goes through. And I don't know if people really realize that between us and the outside world of everything that enters through our mouth is 1 cell thickness. Being British, I have the picture of our old-fashioned castles with our, you know, our old-fashioned soldiers lined up around. That's exactly it. When they're tight by the, you know, side by side, that gut is our defense mechanism. But when we get the breaks in the gut, that's when things can penetrate and get into the body that shouldn't go in where they go in. And then it's like laser tag. You know, the body kind of laser tags something as being an enemy, and the next time we put it in our mouth, the alarm bells go off all over the body, and then we have a reaction. That's what allergic reactions are. So I know that lots of doctors love to pull out the food substances, but the fact is we have to get to heal the gut. And this protects us from our microbiome, our natural defense system. I mean, it is just immensely important. You know, if we have breakdowns in that, we're not going to absorb our food properly. We're not going to really deliver those nutrients. You know, if our gut is out of balance, we're really not able to break down the food sufficiently. And then we have all this kind of opposing mindset. From my perspective, you know, when people will talk about acid reflux, that's a sign you don't have enough acid in your stomach. It's not a sign that you have too much. It's that you're breaking down, and that has to get restored, because it's going to affect everything. You know, skin, nails, hair. You can tell that very quickly by looking at those things as to how healthy somebody is and what kind of absorption that they have. So I love the Asea because I would work with enzymes. And to me, when I first came into this, this was another tool. You know, it's like, well, if I add this in, what if this is the missing link? Because I began to wonder if this approach to cellular communication is not nutrition. We might as well kind of pivot to that piece too. It's not nutrition. Nutrition is the food that we eat, is the materials that the body will build a cell from. And it's also the supplements that we have to engage in, because our food sources just don't have what we need. But I kind of wondered if it was the missing link that would pull everything together and then elevate the outcome. Absolutely is that, but from the perspective as digestive health, it was really interesting. And I think, like you would say, Danielle, it was reconfirmed in that genetic study. Why I was seeing the outcome I was seeing was that suddenly people didn't need all of the enzyme therapy that I was giving them. The outcome was much better. You know, their health improved dramatically. And so I think it really coordinates, again, this labor and delivery piece comes together so that we can really utilize what we're consuming. And it's defense. You know, I've watched the gut problems from so many people with seriously challenged gut issues, you know, where they can't get out of the house because they just have no control over what goes on, which all that we know is inflammatory base. But I've just watched those changes become immensely important to healing gut function.
It's so wonderful, isn't it? I've got this ray of light that
I know you have.
It's like, it's beautiful to have sunshine, but not quite like that. Looks a bit off. I mean, it's something we've talked about a lot, isn't it, Danielle? About, you know, the gut health is absolutely, doesn't matter what species you are, fundamental to all aspects of health. And I think for me, I think you were so right what you were both saying about it being absolutely fundamental and foundational to the starting point, because when you're really working at a cellular level and restoring the balance and the energy within that, then everything else starts to work better. I also wanted to just have a quick cover about the fact, something I heard you mention in one of your other interviews, Carolyn, and this backs up the experience I've seen a lot working with humans and animals, about how sometimes people are taking so many, they've done research, and there's so many natural products, which we know they are, and there's so many things with brilliant benefits. But actually, if your body's not able to process or absorb them, if you're taking too many, it can put more strain on the body. Can we talk a bit of that? Because I think it's very relevant for people, particularly over the last 2 years, where people have been researching at a really different level and trying to protect themselves from all sorts of different things.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, so when I moved into doing nutrition, probably about 22 years ago, I mean, one of the things that I learned very quickly from science was that just because a product is good, is specifically if we think about things like antioxidants, doesn't mean that they work compatibly with other products. That's one piece. I mean, there's a couple of things. Just because it's good, it doesn't mean that you need it. That's one layer. Then in my testing, because I would do scanning and testing and have diagnostic kind of markers to see what was going on with supplements, we would also group test. So, very often if people came up and we tested and they needed 5 particular supplements, we then group test to see if there was a party pooper there, because, you can put them together and individually they can work and be resonant for the body, but then you put them together and it's like a bad personality pops in the room, right? They spoil it for everybody else. So we'd have to be able to identify, was this going to be an aspect of them taking these things, and then either work out whether it really wasn't beneficial, or whether they just took it at another time of the day, and separated that process. But one of the things is I moved in my migrating journey because my mother had pancreatic, bladder and breast cancer at metastatic stage 4, and she didn't want chemo or radiation. I wasn't interested. So that's part of why I really came to learn so much about how do you support that kind of challenge with natural products and with nutrition. But I also went and embarked on doing lymphatic therapy as well. So one of the things that we see, and I will say my mother lived, they gave her 2 months, but she lived 6.5 years without any medication or treatments and got back to virtually near normal. And that wasn't what she died of in the end. So, it's just like there's hope to realize that our body's constantly changing cells, and if we can provide it with the material to make a better cell, over that timeline, we can have entirely different bodies. So I don't think anything is, guaranteed when they give their diagnosis, oh, you're only going to have X. How do they know? I'm sorry, just don't believe that that's the case. So just don't ever buy into that, because it's not good for the body either. But to come back to what you were saying, is that one of the things that happens is that if we have a stagnant or a sluggish lymphatic system, sitting around a lot, not exercising, not doing deep breathing, not hydrated, that will become very sluggish. It becomes kind of gelatinous. So now you have this thing that people reckon, they say, oh, well, I need this and I need this and I need this and I need this. And how many times do you pick up a Life Extension magazine, you've read every article, and you go buy another 10 products because you found a reason for every single one? You're kind of pouring too much into the system. And when the body can't utilize those nutrients, it gets stuck in the lymphatic system, which really clogs everything up. So we actually are creating excess toxicity with things that might seem like they're beneficial, but actually aren't helping or promoting or supporting the body. So it's like having a backpack and keep on adding another stone in the backpack. You're handicapping the body to get healthy. What I found when I moved from the notion that the Asea being cell signaling and how our cells communicate to being beneficial, I realized that it was foundational. And it took me over a year to, instead of thinking that it would improve and work better with things, which it does, that actually I was better to clear the tracks and start with the basis of improving how the cells respirate, how they communicate, how they function, how they have extra energy for healing, right? And if we can support the body to elevate that, get the cleaning going on in the cells, because when we're unhealthy, those cells have stopped breathing, so to speak. We should be putting good nutrients in and junk out. And when it gets blocked up, it just becomes more toxic. It's a heavy load on the body. We don't need more. It's not beneficial. And so I love to now say, other than maybe just a basic digestive enzyme to help the body digest the food when we're eating, just platform with this for at least 2 months, because our clinical studies show, right, we have this uniform shift for every single one of us in that genetic signaling. So I know that without doubt, I can improve all of those areas. And then I picture, in a sense, like a muddy pond. If we can clean out the water, we can see below the surface, and maybe then there's just 1 or 2 rocks that might need some specific nutrient support. And we can be very targeted instead of keep throwing the buckets at the body, you know, keep on throwing everything and overloading the system. So I think that that's another important way to kind of think about what we do, that it just more is not always better.
I can't tell you how much I love that. I just, the more on this journey I'm going, the more excited I am, because I've seen it happen in practice. So I've worked for animals self-medicating for probably about 15 years now. And exactly what you said there, Carolyn, is what happens. So when you see the sickest animals, everyone expects them to take everything, all the natural remedies, and it's completely the opposite. They might just select one thing. And the thing is, every natural product has got so many different benefits. You know, what I'm taking it for and what Danielle's taking it for, our bodies might be doing something completely different with it. And this is the beauty of it, is exactly what you said, is the body has got this amazing innate ability to sort itself out if we give it a chance. And what I love about this, which was my next point to come on to, which I know you can both contribute to, is the safety aspect of it, because this is a game changer, I think, for most people. You know, we all love studying absolutely everything about how it works from a physical, spiritual, energetic level, but some people haven't got the time or inclination to do that. But it's incredibly safe, isn't it, ladies?
Yeah, well, that was my big concern, because like, it's so funny, as you're talking, Karen, I was laughing because my journey with my recovery from my injury, I was taking like handfuls of supplements. I just like, in the morning and at night. And at one point I was just like, it takes me like 20 minutes to swallow all these things. It was just like,
I'm with you.
And it got to the point where I'm like, well, what's working? What's not? Like, and then, you know, Redox comes into this. And that's why I had said no to it. I'm like, I have tried everything. Like, no, thank you. No more. Like, I'm done. And so for 6 months, I sat there in that space. But, you know, when I finally opened up, because I watched what it did for my parents, the one thing I was very concerned about was the contraindications, because I'm like, well, I'm taking all these things. And at that point I had kind of broken down and I was on a prescription medication because the pounding in my head was just relentless. And it was hard to just operate. So I was on a prescription for that. And I thought, I do not want to mess with those things. Like, you know, I was nervous enough to start that. Like, I don't want to do that. And what I kept hearing, kept being said, all the doctors we spoke to that were involved with Asea, they said, no, it's impossible to have a contraindication. Like, you need to tell your daughter that what's in that bottle is in her. The molecules are already reacting and interacting with what she's taking. If she puts in more, you know, it's not going to be a problem. And I thought, oh, okay. Like, I get it. Like, the body already has this in it. It's just going to start going. And so then I started with it. Now, you know, over the years, as I've learned more, it's like, okay, well, there's also like not an amount that's too much. Like, they told me when I first started, like, drink a bottle in 24 hours, flood your system with it, because you have so much damage. Like, let's put the construction workers, right, get that renovation crew in there, because there's a lot of work. I did that. And, you know, it was fine. And then I drank 8 ounces a day. And back then I didn't know that you could even do more than that. Like, I thought, oh, that's like, you know, that's what they say, because that's doubling what the bottle says. It's fine. It's just like, you get to a point, maybe Carolyn, you can speak more to this, but you get to a point where it's like, well, you've probably saturated your system. It's not going to be detrimental. There's no toxicity, but it's at the point where it's like, the body's like, okay, we don't need to signal anymore. Like, communication's clear. So I don't know exactly what that amount is, but yeah, I mean, Catherine, that's what's beautiful. Like, and that's why I've been so excited to educate and share with others, is because I know it can't hurt them. And I know that it will help them. The question is just, well, what's it going to do? Because it's different for everybody. But you know, little babies, you know, a lot of my friends are having kids and they've got little ones. And then my grandmother that was in her 90s, like, the whole spectrum and age range, I've gotten to like help and support with Redox, and knowing I can go to sleep soundly, knowing there's not going to be a problem, like, ever.
Yeah, I think it's kind of interesting to you know, maybe we just think in terms of what it is going to do. I mean, it isn't going to do anything, right? What's in this bottle, it's what the body does with it that is the outcome. And that's why it's so variable. And I say to people, you know, this is not a cookie cutter program. It's not take 2 tablets tonight and, you know, call me in the morning. It's not the same thing every day. And we often use this phrase more recently of, you know, the sleep number bed, right? What's your perfect number? Everyone's going to resonate. Their body is going to resonate resonate with whatever's optimal for them. But to your point, I think you're right. I mean, I've been in nutrition for 20 odd years, but the fact is you can have a brilliantly created and formulated nutritional supplement made of materials, but the fact is it's still a potential for it to interact with a drug, and that's why doctors have become a lot more conscious of asking you, do you take nutritional supplements? They want to know what's in them, because a lot of them do interfere with the drug mechanism, and that's their concern. I still don't know of any single supplement that I can recommend that we know from clinical studies is non-toxic. As you said, Danielle, you can drink as much of it as you want, but I mean, there is a kind of point at which your body wouldn't need any more. That will vary from person to person. You can't be allergic to it because, as you said, it's already innocent. As you were mentioning about, well, you know, it's not going to interfere with your meds because you're already producing it. Maybe the question should be, when they want to give you a medication, well, are you already making any redox molecules? Because if that was the problem, then maybe they shouldn't give you the medication, right? But it isn't. I mean, if we're making it, we can't be allergic to it because it's innately what's keeping us alive. We came into the world because of a redox reaction. We'll go out of the world when we don't make enough, and the in between is the challenge. Do we have a sufficient amount to keep ourselves healthy all the time, or are we losing the control on that? But then that third piece about that it's transparent to medication, and they know this scientifically, it's not going to interfere with the drug. I don't have anything else that carte blanche I could just uniformly give to someone and not worry about the fact that they're on meds, and not have to go, well, we need to think about this, that, or the other, or that one's not good for you. So it is really unique from that perspective.
To me, it's a complete game changer, because so many people, particularly my family members, my poor mother, you know, I'm like, oh, mum, this, you know. The animals are easy because I work with them with self-medication, but with my mum and my family, I'm just like, right, take this. So I've done more research over the years and discovered more things. This is an absolute complete game changer, because to have something where you can hand on heart know it's safe, you don't have to be encouraging people to change anything on their medication. Now, they might at a later date decide in conjunction with their medical practitioners that they don't need as much of certain things, but it's completely safe. So I really wanted to put that point across again, because I know that's a sort of top of the list for not only people that are considering taking it to themselves, but also people that are wanting to recommend it for loved ones. Now, I'm
just going to say, maybe at that point, though, maybe just one other thing that we should talk about is, because very often people say, well, it's salt water, right? Yeah. I'm on a salt restricted diet. Okay, so here's an interesting thing. I love as you can probably notice, I'm a visual person, right? So, you know, I love showing slides of like, well, butter, sugar, eggs, and flour, right? And we transform it into being a cake, right? The transformation, the chemical transformation is what we do here. So we start with the same ingredients, that purified, highly purified water and the sodium chloride, but then it goes through this transformation that takes 3.5 days to do what we can do in the human body in a nanosecond. And it's moving this liquid process through different stages and putting different electrical frequencies through it that breaks the bonds of those two components and reorganizes it to become these redox molecules. And then, because their science is so brilliant, they can measure the activity level and literally lock it off at a certain point. And so we stabilize what was thought to be totally impossible, these highly bioactive molecules that don't do anything in the bottle. They do it on us when they come in contact with us because we're organic, or with the gel when we put it on our skin and all of those things. So just to know that in that 3.5 day process, by the time we finish with it, the salt is only there because of frequency. I use salt in my water because when I'm doing detoxification pathways, I have to have certain voltage and amps. And if you don't have the right amount of salt, you can't put frequencies through it. So it transforms, and an average consumption of 4 ounces of Asea a day will have no more sodium in it than the equivalency of about half a carrot or a slice of bread, you know. So everybody can use this, even if they're on a sodium restricted diet. So that's the cool piece.
That's such an important point. Thank you so much for bringing that in. Now, I could talk to you ladies all day, but I know you're incredibly busy. So for me, one of the things I wanted to finish off with and get both your thoughts on, is we are all passionate about saying incorporate things like this into a healthy lifestyle. And I'm going to be putting both your links below because, for example, Danielle, your Instagram is absolutely brilliant with all these little tips and things about how to look at the whole of the lifestyle. Carolyn, I know you're really, really passionate about that, aren't you?
Very much so, because epigenetics is, you know, the expression of our DNA, right? And we have control of that. I mean, it's a responsibility if we think about this, really, because every action we take, whether it's, you know, mental, whether it's physical, whether it's energetic, I mean, everything that we do affects our health. And so we can have choices that can make sure that we preserve our health as best as possible. And to me, this is part and parcel of it. But it's also important to think that nothing is a magic bullet. Right. Yeah. So I think you kind of reminded me that I'd said on another call, you can't sit on the couch and eat donuts and drink soda and think that you take this and everything's fine. I mean, it just doesn't work like that. You have to understand that we ultimately have the responsibility for the majority of what we can do to protect ourselves. And then we can do these other things to augment and support the natural processes. And I think this is the most foundational thing that we could probably ever think of doing, because it's innately in us. It's in every single cell. We're born with a full glass, so to speak, of it, and we just have less of it as it goes through. So to me, it would be like saying, well, you know, have a car and we're going to give you one gas tank through your lifetime, and that's it. You know, the harder you use it, the shorter your lifespan, the more you protect it, maybe the longer your lifespan. But then if somebody comes along and says, but they've opened up a gas station down the road and you can top up every day, why wouldn't you?
Yeah.
Why wouldn't you? You know, that's to me as foundational as it gets. Why wouldn't you? If this is the operating system of the human body, without which we don't exist, nothing occurs. It's the car with no electrical function, right? We have to have electricity for everything, for us to be talking, to breathe, to sleep, to do anything. We need to have cells that are resonating at their highest potential. And that's why healthy organic foods are important as well. You know, raw foods have high energetic frequencies that donate to health of our cell. Processed foods don't. They drain us. They pull on that energy supply, on that battery. So everything that we do is important. But I just think that this is kind of really the most foundational thing that we could do in terms of taking something that supports us.
Yeah. Your analogies, Carolyn, are my favorite. I mean, your ability to like paint the picture with that muddy pond and this clearing the water, and then with the gas tank, it is. That's why I was like, yeah, sign me up. I mean, it's just like when you understand the role that this plays, specifically with the redox, it's like, it's just this no-brainer of like, yeah, top me off. Thank you. Top me off. Let's keep going. But it is important. I mean, what you put in your body, I'll never forget. I didn't notice it. I mean, I lost my health in my mid-20s, right? And I think at that point, most people are probably not paying that much attention to their health and what I was putting in my body. And it was incredible because I would notice, like, if I ate a certain thing, it would set me off for like another day of just feeling so awful and so off. And it was the first time I realized this connection, which is crazy to think, but this connection between what I was eating and how my physical body was actually feeling. And since then, I've gotten more and more conscious about, you know, what it is that I'm putting in. And that's why I'm able to run, you know, in an optimal way. But it makes such a difference. Catherine, or go ahead.
I think, you know, and it's never too early to start.
Yeah.
You know, we have 3 kids who are 24, 25, and 28, and our 28-year-old's been on it since we first got it. And she laughs. I mean, she'll say, well, you know, Mum, I get carded again now because I look younger.
It's awesome.
Brilliant, isn't it?
She loves it, but she said, I don't get my friends. They all see that I'm healthy. I don't get sick. I can work hard. I can be late. I can go out and drink. Not that that's a good thing that we're promoting, but you know what I mean is she doesn't wake up with the challenges that they have if they go out for a night. All right. She functions. She said they all wonder, how do you do this? How do you stay healthy? How do you not pick up the stuff? How do you always got energy to do stuff? But it's because of this.
And I would back that up because my daughter, who's a really good athlete, and my son is as well, and they both take it. And I didn't they weren't taking it because they had something wrong, although my daughter did have quite a serious football injury, and she learned so much. She actually says now, and she's so wise, she's only 20, she says the best thing that could ever have happened to me being out for a year with this, because it's taught me so much about my body and what I need to do moving forward, and my mind, to actually prevent things happening. And she's noticed the most phenomenal increase in her performance, recovery, injury prevention. And this is what I mean. But I would also like to say to people, it's not too late to start either. Yes, it could, you know, so whatever stage you're at, it's about really, there's a lot of talk about self-love now. And for me, the ultimate in self-love is making choices today that your tomorrow self will thank you for. And if you've got animals that you're responsible for, that are 100% responsible for what you feed them, what you put in their body, where they go, who they interact with, you know, the ultimate in self-love for myself is I'm not going to take something for me that I'm not going to share with my loved furry friends. So thank you so much, ladies. I really, really appreciate your time. I just want to tell everyone watching this, both Danielle and Dr. Carolyn, they give up their time. They don't need to come on things like this. They're busy, they're successful, they're helping loads of people on their own. And the generosity that you've both got of sharing your knowledge for free with my audience, because you're so passionate about what you do, I appreciate you both so much. And I know everyone watching this does. So thank you both so, so much.
You're welcome.
Yeah.
Paying it forward.
Exactly. It reached us, and we're just grateful that, you know, you have the ability to reach many more people. So we're happy to share.
It's
Absolutely.
brilliant. And the links will always be below, and you all know how to get hold of me. So if you need any help, just please reach out. That's what I'm there for. Thank you.